Mr. Abbadi.
Thank you, Linda. First of all, thank you for coming here tonight. I see some of our colleagues, correspondent at the UN, including our president of the ANCA Correspondent Association. Thank you for showing up here on a night like this. I also want to thank Ms. Kranz for organizing this meeting, and to thank, of course, our moderator with her broad smile always to disarm all the adversaries. We are tackling the question of the UN facing the world, and we are all historians of the UN here on this panel, so it's no surprise that we'll overlap from time to time. But I am looking at the UN with a critical eye. My book is called Undiplomatic Look at the United Nations, and I mean that. I have seen the organization from many points of view, from the point of view of a staff member of 30 years there, from the point of view of a diplomat. I served around two years as a diplomat with the delegation. I served as a journalist. I'm still a journalist. I served as an academic. So I looked at it from inside and outside, and I have to come to some conclusions. But the UN, as Professor Lessinger said, has weaknesses and has strength. But let me go through some of my general comments, and then we'll open it to discussion after everybody made their points. I hope it will be something interesting. In the 21st century, we are witnessing an area of increasingly fast development and complex problems and crises. It's a cliche to say that today's global problems and crises require global solution and stop at that. What we need is a new and creative thinking, new and innovative structures, and a modern means of management for this crisis. This is the story of the United Nations. This is what I describe in my new book, Undiplomatic Look at the United Nations. The United Nations, born on 26 June 1945, lacks those means. Its structures are old, its financing inadequate. It needs dynamic and visionary leadership. Those means are necessary for the organization to be able to face the issues of our turbulent world. In the 60s, the Chinese used to say, under the quiet heavens, there is a turmoil. Today there is turmoil even in the heavens. The atmosphere and the skies are polluted. The crisis of climate change is only one. The UN faces many crises, as you very well know. Political crisis and conflict, crisis of terrorism, crisis of refugees and migrants, humanitarian crisis, crisis of corruption, crisis of confidence in government and in some institutions. There are no statesmen today in the world with courage and vision as we used to see some of them in the past. These crises cover the planet and they are not limited to one region. The question is, how is the UN facing up to this crisis? I submit that it is doing it with delay and timidity. With delay because of lack of consensus among the negotiators, and also because of lack of readiness to compromise. With timidity because it's easier to adopt declarations than plans of actions which require financial resources. Today, governments are reluctant to provide the money more and more. With timidity also because of passive UN leadership instead of a dynamic and bold leadership that invokes Article 99 of the UN Charter. As you know, under this article, the Secretary General is empowered to bring to the attention of the Security Council any matter which, in his opinion or her opinion, we don't have her yet, may threaten international peace and security. That power is always at the disposal of the Secretary General. The result are that problems, conflicts, and crises accumulate. We have a long list of unresolved ones before the Council, old and new ones. Take some of the old ones, 40, 50, 60, more than that years old, like the conflict in Kashmir, like between India and Pakistan, like the Middle East conflict between Israel and Palestinians, like Cyprus between Greece and Turkey, like Western Sahara between Morocco and the Polisario. New ones like Syria, Iraq, and Yemen, all these remain to be resolved. What are the consequences of these conflicts not being tackled? The UN can be seen as inefficient, to some extent irrelevant. Members remember the lack of action during the Rwanda genocide in 1994. Let's look at some recent examples. The US and Cuba a few months ago established diplomatic relationship. It wasn't the UN that contributed to that, it was Pope Francis. On Syria, we wait for Secretary of State John Kerry and Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov to work things out before the UN Special Envoy Stefan de Mistura and the UN step in. In Asia, China established the Asia Infrastructure and Investment Bank, which many Western countries joined. It will compete with the IMF because no efforts were made to restructure the IMF to recognize the reality of the economic and political weight of China and other countries, such as the emerging countries, Brazil and India, and so forth and so on. All this does not mean that the UN has not done good work. Indeed it has. It was instrumental in bringing the end of colonial rule in the 60s. It contributed decisively to the liberation of South Africa from the rule of apartheid. Its specialized agencies like UNICEF and WHO do great work. Add to this the Paris Agreement on climate change, which seems to be a success. But the UN can do much better. To be able to do that, it needs revitalized institutions and structures, more funding. It needs to tackle the root causes of conflict and to use preventive diplomacy. We have a budget of $8 billion devoted to peacekeeping, $8 billion. We have a mere pathetic 1 million devoted to preventive diplomacy. I think that is unacceptable. It needs a dynamic and visionary leadership, such as during the times of Dag Hammarskjöld. Will it choose such leader? Will it choose such leader this month as the new Secretary General? I don't believe so. Thank you.